Paul Swain.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to contribute to this debate, which has been somewhat enlightening so far. But I think my starting point and my analysis in this debate as a democratic socialist is what structures of governance are best situated to deliver maximum economic benefit to working people in terms of delivering the highest possible quality of life in public services and amenities to serve their interests. And that really underpins my thinking. And when I think of the benefits of the Union, I think back to my own grandparents, my grandfather fighting with the Royal Artillery in a common cause with people from all across the United Kingdom to defeat fascism in Europe. But that common cause transcended into the spirit of 1945 and that 1945 election that delivered the first majority Labour government that fundamentally transformed this country and delivered the welfare state and indeed delivered the pillars that underpin our modern civilisation in this country. And that really is why I've never had any doubt in my mind about why I wanted to join the Labour Party at the age of 16. I knew that the Labour Party might not have delivered everything that was good, but everything that had been good in this country in the preceding 70 years had been delivered by the Labour Party. And that is why I had no doubt in my mind that every great societal achievement and progress that this country had achieved had been delivered by solidarity of working people acting in the labour and trade union movement. And that is why I have never any doubt that the United Kingdom serves their interests when the British state is mobilised in their service. And indeed, when I look at Scotland today, I think of the benefits we achieve, and if nothing else holds true, Scotland every year benefits from £9 billion that they wouldn't otherwise have to invest in the provision of public services that ensure the quality of life where people in Scotland is better than it otherwise would be. That is equivalent to £1,470 per person in Scotland every year. And for as long as that figure holds true and holds correct, there can be no socialist analysis for unpicking and destroying that union that delivers that economic and social benefit for the people of Scotland. Indeed, such is the SNP's analysis so awry when it comes to dealing with that reality. They have ran away from the idea of full fiscal autonomy because the transfer is undisputable. Indeed, looking at their latest analysis in the so-called Growth Commission, we have seen the objective about them trying to compare Scotland to other advanced economies in the world and delivering a target of reducing the fiscal deficit in Scotland to under 3% of GDP within 5 to 10 years. But, however, John McLaren of the Scottish Trends has responded that it clearly involves a tighter fiscal strategy over the same period than is likely for the rest of the UK. The Office of the Budget Responsibility currently expects the UK to have a deficit equivalent to 2.3% of GDP in 2021-2022 and falling, which should allow for an easing in public expenditure settlements over time. Meanwhile, Scotland will be moving from a deficit equivalent to nearly 6% of GDP towards a 3% target. It doesn't take a mathematical genius to work out the implications of that. As long as those implications will threaten the interests of working people in Scotland, I am opposed to the notion of separation and I am committed to the idea of union in this country. Indeed, the Growth Commission assumes an independent Scotland would achieve a GDP per capita growth rate of 0.7% greater than it would if remaining in the United Kingdom. However, the justification for this figure is extremely tenuous. It relies on including territories such as Hong Kong and Singapore in their comparison set, despite explicitly rejecting those countries' low tax and high income inequality economic models. So if you remove Hong Kong and Singapore from the comparable countries' growth rate analysis, the 0.7% benefit becomes just 0.26%. If this were the case, instead of the 25 years the Growth Commission assumes it would take to close the gap with the UK of £9 billion, it would take 67 years. £9 billion is, of course, less than the £10.3 billion effective fiscal transfer that Scotland received from the rest of the UK in 2016-17, something we would lose on day one of independence. So to test that assumption further, if we look back at the Independence White Paper, the equivalent figure used then was in fact just a benefit of 0.12% per annum. On that basis, it would take over 140 years to close the gap with the UK. Why on earth would anyone want to vote for that situation? Finally, if we look at the performance of the three countries in the Growth Commission, explicitly cites as the ones they want to learn in particular from, which were Denmark, Finland and New Zealand, then the superior growth rate using the Growth Commission's own data sources becomes just an immaterial 0.06%. So I think it's becoming apparent that these comparisons are utterly fanciful, but on that basis it would take nearly 300 years to close the gap. That is the entire length of time that the United Kingdom has existed. It's utterly absurd and demonstrates that the Growth Commission is intellectually bereft of any rigour. Then we have the albatross of the currency, of course, and in designing a currency regime, the mechanism for independent country It is critical that the regime offers the country a credible means of adjusting disequilibria, that is, deficits and surpluses on its balance of payments. If it doesn't, and in the absence of a risk-sharing agreement or transfer mechanism, it is doomed to fail. And we've seen that play out in Europe when Greece and Ireland have suffered heavy internal devaluations and mega austerity. This is an important lesson in the economic history of currency regimes. In thinking about the appropriate currency regime for an independent Scotland, it is crucial to have this adjustment question at the back of our minds at all times. So if Scotland were to become an independent country, it would actually become a net exporter of hydrocarbons. It is well known in currency economics that in designing a currency regime for a country with a diversified non-oil export sector and an oil sector as well, the crucial role of oil price changes in affecting the competitiveness of the non-oil sector, i.e. the manufacturing and services sectors, gets crowded out with the implications this has for jobs, output and the sustainability of the balance of payments and interest rates. This is the classic Dutch disease phenomenon. However, in all of the literature on currency issues that has been generated since the referendum, including the Scottish Government's Growth Commission, they don't even address this particular issue. Regardless of the currency regime that independent Scotland would choose, it is going to need a market-credible pool of foreign exchange reserves to run a currency regime. From evidence of similar-sized economies, this would amount to £40 billion. This amount is around one-third of Scotland's annual GDP, and is not a sum of money that a newly separate Scotland could borrow in international financial markets. The only way that such an amount could be accumulated is through running budgetary surpluses for a number of years. Such an austerity programme would need to be run in any case in order to establish the hard currency effect, and so the reserve accumulation issue can be seen as reinforcing this effect. And the Growth Commission's own alternative to the 2014 White Paper as a formal currency union would be to adopt the pound such as Panama adopts the dollar, such as Montenegro adopts the euro, and so on. This is a currency substitution system, but such a system is viewed as inherently unstable by economists because it is subject to the whims of individual expectations and the effects that these can have on demand for money, which can lead to changes in the supply through balance of payments. There would be no effective control over the money supply in Scotland and no lender of last resort function. This is because changes in the current account and the balance of payments would directly affect the money supply in the Scottish economy. So, for example, with a surplus on the current balance, this would increase the quantity of sterling in the economy, with the inflationary implications this would have. Conversely, a current account deficit would draw money out of the economy, with deflationary implications. In order to deal with such flows, a separate monetary authority would need to be set up to smooth those effects. However, evidence from similar-sized economies to Scotland, for example the Nordic countries, you need foreign exchange reserves upwards of £40 billion to achieve that. But the Monetary Authority was prepared to offer deposit insurances to the sum of £120 billion of retail deposit accounts in Scotland. It would need to accumulate foreign exchange reserves on around £160 billion. That's greater than the entire Scottish GDP. Extraordinary figures. Where would this money come from, given the balance of payments in an independent Scotland is going to have a deficit of between 2 to 5% of GDP, and in the region, therefore, of £67 billion just to cover these international obligations? The only way these sums could be achieved would be through a massive austerity programme. And just for context, the Scottish NHS budget every year is just £13 billion. You can wipe that out right away. I'm afraid that is simply not a sustainable position for anyone with a socialist background to endorse. All of the above points focus purely on the monetary implications, but indeed look at the competitiveness of the non-oil export sector with the effect of the oil price changes. That would massively impact on the competitiveness of the Scottish economy, entailing mass industrial closures of the scale we saw through the 1980s. Indeed, any other alternatives, such as a formal sterlingisation where there is a currency board, would need the currency to be backed 100% by foreign exchange reserves, again an unsustainable position. Such systems require considerable amounts of foreign exchange, both cash and reserves, to back deposit accounts. To run a currency board, the Hong Kong experience shows £200 billion of reserves are required. These are massive sums of money, which in turn require policies of fiscal austerity and balance of payment surpluses and no lender of last resort function. Again, the loss of competitiveness issue would not be addressed in this set-up either, and it is simply not viable as a currency option unless the Scottish Government is intent on handing over large sums of Scottish taxpayers' money to hedge funds and speculators. So I think to interrogate the Scottish Growth Commission's proposals demonstrates that they cannot offer a socialist solution to separation. That is why the Growth Commission has achieved only one thing. It has demonstrated that the huge benefits we derived from being part of the fiscal, monetary and political union are as relevant and integral today to the quality of life in Scotland as they ever have been, and that is why we continue to argue as a Socialist Labour Party that we must marshal the forces of the British state to deliver the best quality of outcomes for the people of Scotland by utilising its fiscal powers and its monetary powers to deliver public services that are world-class for the people of Scotland. And we stand by that commitment today, as we did in 1945 when this party built the National Health Service and the welfare state.